Squash. Not entirely sure if this counts as Prorevenge. Mods, feel free to remove if it doesn't fit here or breaks the rules or whatever. When I was a sophomore in high school, I was dating this guy. Let's call him Jack. He was this brooding guy in the Spanish class, and I was super into the whole mysterious, not talking to anyone, not caring vibe. Once we started dating, things were pretty cool. He was nice and funny, but he would make little comments all the time that just weren't okay. For example, I didn't like cursing back then. So when he would say fuck, I would ask him to stop. And he would just say, why the fuck should I fucking stop saying fuck? Over the next few months, things got worse and worse. He didn't want me talking to boys, which I accepted as him just being a jealous boyfriend. But then, he didn't want me talking to girls either, because he thought I would badmouth him. When I talked to girls in front of him, he accused me of talking in code about him. Even though I was only saying things like, oh, that test in math was hard. Right. Then came the emotional manipulation. When we could get into arguments, he would storm out of my house and cause scenes in front of my neighbors, forcing me to just agree to whatever he wanted so that he would stop making me look bad in front of others. He would say things like, oh, if you loved me, you would do this. One time, I tried to break up with him, and he ran to my house 10 miles away to make sure that I felt guilty enough to stay with him. Not long after all of this came the physical stuff. He would throw things, hit me. He even punched a hole in my wall. That was fun, trying to come up with an explanation for my parents. 10 months after we started dating, I finally ended it after he sexually assaulted me. I told my parents everything, and they made sure that I was able to break up with him without him guilting me into backing out. What I didn't realize was that, during the sexual assault, he'd taken pictures. The next day at school, he threatened to show them to everyone, his friends, my parents, teachers, college admissions, everyone. I told one of my rather intimidating friends about it, and she made sure to put a stop to that. She ended up hunting him down, beating the shit out of him, and forcing him to delete the pics. She was the best, and I made sure to buy her a burger for that. He'd also lent me his graphing calculator for algebra. You know, the ones that cost like $200. He told me that he didn't want it back, but that he wanted the money to buy a new one. He also wanted $500 for all of the pizza, dinners, etc. that he'd bought me over our relationship. I said fuck that, bagged up all of the stuff he'd lent me, and put it in his locker. When I got home that night, the bag was sitting on my front porch. I ended up driving to his house and giving the stuff to his parents, making sure to explain that while he bought me food, I also bought him food, so I didn't owe him shit. All of that is a long-winded way to say that this guy sucked. Fast forward about a year. I was in therapy, taking medicine, and doing much better after that entire ordeal. I hadn't spoken to him at all, and things were great. Then, I get a call from him. Now, Jack's dream was to join the Marines. He'd been training with a Marine recruiter for nearly 2 years, getting in shape, making sure he was up to standard to join. As much as I hated him, I have to admit that he worked his ass off for that. When Jack called me, he asked me to be a character reference for him. Why, he asked me, I have no fucking idea. After all the shit he did, you'd think he would have wanted me as far away from the recruiting people as possible. Nonetheless, he asked, so I did what any good friend would do, and I told him, sure, I'd be happy to be your reference. He said great. and told me the stuff to say once the recruiting officer called. Stuff like, "Jack's an upstanding person, very loyal, very strong, very hard-working. A great guy to have in the Marines." I said no problem, and hung up. 2 weeks later, I get the call. Sergeant whatever asked me a couple of questions, like how did I know Jack? Did I think he would be a good fit for the Marines? What kind of person was he? Etc. You better believe that I told that guy everything. I told him about the emotional manipulation, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, all of it, in painstaking detail. The sergeant was pretty quiet through all of this, just listening, jotting everything down I imagine. At the end of the call, he said, "Thank you for telling me all of this. I'll be honest, that's not what I was expecting to hear. But I appreciate your honesty. That's not the kind of person we want in the Marines." I agreed with him on that point. And we hung up. Never talked to Jack again after that. Last I heard, he's working at McD's. Still in our podunk hometown. I guess my character reference didn't help him get into the Marines. Whoops. Edit. Thanks for the gold and silver. And also, thank you for the supportive comments. I was debating whether or not to even post this, and I'm glad I did. To answer some questions. No, my friend and I are not still in contact. We stayed friends for a couple of years. But once we both went off to college we kind of just lost touch. Yes, I swear now. I'm not shitting on McD's or the people who work there at all. I'm just saying that he went from having his dream job to having a minimum wage job in his hometown. I didn't press charges or try to give the pics to the police because I just didn't think of it at the time. I was in panic mode and just wanted it to go away. But if it happened now, I still probably wouldn't go to the police. Most sexual assault cases never end in the abuser getting in trouble, and the victim has their name dragged through the mud, and it's just not worth it for me tbh. A note on Jack. While I'm not excusing what he did, he had his own issues that I'm not going to get into here. I looked him up last night, and he's got a girlfriend now. They seem happy, and it looks like he got the help he needed. I still don't like him, but I'm glad things seem to have worked out for him. TLDR. Abusive ex-boyfriend asks me to be a character reference for him to join the Marines. So I tell the sergeant all of the shitty things he did.